Imagine making a deal worth hundreds of billions of dollars and not being able to tell anyone exactly what's in it. That's where the world's two largest economies find themselves right now. And while Washington and Beijing are still figuring out what they actually agreed to, on the other side of the Atlantic, the European Union is racing against a July 4th deadline that could reshape trade as we know it. Tonight on the Daily Latitude, we break it all down. Good evening and welcome to the Daily Latitude. I'm your host, and this is the place where we cut through the noise and give you the story that actually matters. Today we're covering what could be the most consequential week in global trade in years. Two major stories are unfolding simultaneously, and they're connected in ways that most people aren't talking about. Story number one, the European Union is preparing to scrap import duties on American goods, but European lawmakers are deeply divided over whether to trust Donald Trump to hold up his end of the bargain. Story number two, Trump just returned from Beijing claiming fantastic trade deals with China, but experts are asking a very uncomfortable question. Did anything actually get agreed? Let's start in Brussels. Back in July of last year, Trump and European Commission President Ursula von der Leyen struck a trade deal at, and yes, this is real, Trump's Turnberry Golf Resort in Scotland. Under that agreement, the EU would remove import duties on American industrial goods and open its doors to U.S. farm and seafood products. In return, the United States would impose a 15% tariff on most European goods, significantly lower than the brutal rates Trump had been threatening. Sounds like a fair exchange, right? Well, nearly 10 months later, the deal still isn't done. Here's why. The European Parliament and EU governments have to pass actual legislation before any of this takes effect. And they've been stuck in a standoff over one fundamental question. What happens if Trump changes his mind? EU lawmakers, particularly in the Parliament, want what they're calling a sunrise clause. That means the EU would only start cutting its duties after the United States actually fulfills its commitments, not before, not on a promise, after. They also want a sunset clause, an automatic expiration date on EU concessions set for March 31st, 2028, essentially a built-in escape hatch. And they want the ability to immediately suspend the entire deal if Washington breaks the terms. EU governments, on the other hand, are more cautious. They're worried that pushing too hard on safeguards will anger the Trump administration and create legal uncertainty for European businesses that are already struggling. Now, here's where it gets urgent. Trump has set a July 4th deadline. If the EU doesn't implement its side of the deal by Independence Day, he's threatening to raise tariffs on European cars, from the current 15% all the way up to 25%. As of today, negotiators were meeting for what was expected to be a final round of talks. Sources inside the Parliament say a deal could be struck tonight, or by early Wednesday morning. If they reach agreement, a final European Parliament vote is expected in mid-June, just in time to meet Trump's deadline. But here's the big picture question nobody is asking loudly enough. Is the EU giving up too much, too fast for a deal that could evaporate the moment Trump decides the terms no longer suit him? That's not a rhetorical question. It's the exact question European lawmakers are wrestling with tonight. Now let's cross to the other side of the world, because while Europe is nervously watching Washington, Beijing just wrapped up what Trump called an incredible visit. Last Friday, Trump returned from a summit with Chinese President Xi Jinping, declaring, quote, fantastic trade deals. Big wins, historic agreements. So what exactly did America get? Let's go through the announcements one by one. Boeing aircraft. China agreed to purchase 200 Boeing planes, with Trump suggesting that number could eventually rise to 750. Boeing called it a success, the first major Chinese order for their aircraft in nearly a decade. But here's the catch. Boeing's stock actually fell 3.8% on the day of the announcement. Investors were underwhelmed. Some analysts had expected a much larger initial order. Agricultural products. The White House says China agreed to purchase at least $17 billion in U.S. agricultural goods over 3 years: soybeans, beef, poultry. China also restored market access for hundreds of U.S. beef facilities that had been blocked. Energy. Trump said China agreed to buy more American oil. But energy experts are pointing out there's no specific number, no binding commitment, no statement from China confirming exactly how much oil they'll buy or when. A new Board of Trade, perhaps the most significant structural outcome. The two countries agreed to establish a formal Board of Trade to manage economic relations and mediate disputes. For context, before this, U.S.-China trade disputes were handled on an ad hoc basis, no formal structure, just whoever picked up the phone. Now, here's where it gets complicated. Former U.S. trade negotiator Wendy Cutler told CBS News she was expecting, quote, mega purchases of agriculture, energy, and aircraft, her assessment. So far, it doesn't seem like Trump and his team have a lot to show for the visit. Economists are also pointing out that most of what was announced are verbal commitments, not signed contracts, not legally binding agreements. And this isn't the first time we've seen this movie. Back in 2017, Trump's trip to China produced an agreement for nearly $84 billion in Chinese investment in West Virginia energy projects. That deal completely dissolved as U.S.-China tensions escalated. So the question for viewers tonight is this: are we watching a genuine reset in the world's most important economic relationship? Or are we watching a very expensive photo opportunity dressed up as diplomacy? The honest answer right now is we don't know. And that uncertainty itself tells us something important. So what connects these two stories? Here's what the Daily Latitude sees. Donald Trump is simultaneously pressuring his closest allies in Europe and his biggest strategic rival in China, using tariffs as a lever in both cases. And in both cases, the other side is trying to figure out how much of this is real and how much is theater. The EU is essentially being asked to trust a president who has already paused the required legislation twice due to new threats. European lawmakers want safeguards for a reason. China is making announcements that sound big but remain largely unconfirmed, and experts who've watched this before are warning that the details may never fully materialize. What we're witnessing is a new era of transactional diplomacy, where trade deals are made over golf resort dinners and Beijing summits, announced loudly on social media, and then quietly renegotiated or abandoned. For ordinary people, whether you're a European car manufacturer, an American soybean farmer, or a consumer paying more at the pump, the consequences of these deals are very real and very uncertain. Here's what you need to watch in the coming days. For the EU deal, watch for the European Parliament vote expected in mid-June. If it passes, the tariff cuts should kick in before July 4th. If it fails or gets delayed, expect a sharp escalation from Washington. For the China deal, watch for the White House fact sheet that Trade Representative Jamieson Greer promised is coming very soon. That document will tell us whether these agreements have real teeth or whether they're mostly talking points. Both stories will move fast, and the Daily Latitude will be here to break it down for you every step of the way. That's your briefing for today. No spin, no noise, just the story that matters. If you found this valuable, hit subscribe and leave a comment below. Tell me, do you think the EU should trust Trump's trade deal? And did the China summit actually deliver? I want to hear from you. I'm your host. This is the Daily Latitude. We'll see you next time.